Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another interview from the Art of Sherlock Holmes. Up today is our author interview with Spencer Perkins. Good afternoon, Spencer, or good morning. You're West Coast, so it's pretty early for you.
Yeah, it's a bit early here. It's the evening for you, I know.
Yeah, so whereabouts are you calling in from, Spencer?
Live in Portland, Oregon, so it's a little foggy outside. We've been getting some rain, but it's pretty good.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, it's raining here in London. The closest I get to sunshine is my West Palm Beach t-shirt, which I try and remember to wear for all of these interviews. So that's my little bit of sunshine for the Art of Sherlock Holmes project. So let's jump straight into your writing, your Sherlock Holmes writing. How did you get involved with Sherlock Holmes? What was your first experience with Holmes?
It was actually a college class. It was about detective fiction, and a Sherlock Holmes story was one of the first that we had read. It was actually the Red-Headed League was the story that we had read in that class, and it was just really interesting. I had just never read any of Arthur Conan Doyle's work before, and so that was my first real introduction to him, and then I just started reading more of his other Sherlock Holmes stories after that. And then, of course, the BBC Sherlock came out in 2011, and that really hooked me in, seeing the modernized version and being able to sort of juxtapose that with the old original stories. And I was a Sherlock Holmes fan ever since.
Fantastic. And how do you feel about the Robert Downey movies? Because there's a new one coming.
Those are great as well. I really like seeing all the different interpretations of Sherlock Holmes from the different filmmakers, and then, of course, all the different books. And there's just such a rich world there for people to explore with different art mediums.
Yeah, and talking about being able to explore new stories, you wrote a Sherlock Holmes story yourself, which appeared in the MX Book of New Sherlock Holmes Stories.
Yes.
So you were in the first volume there, and what's the story called?
It's called The Deadly Soldier. It's actually about Moriarty instead of Sherlock, because I've always been very partial to villains myself. I find villains very fascinating. And so I knew when I wanted to write a story that I wanted to actually focus on his life, and his life away from Sherlock, actually, what his life would be like even when he's not playing cat and mouse games with Sherlock Holmes. Well,
for those that aren't familiar with the MX Book of New Sherlock Holmes Stories, it's a project that was the brainchild of an author called David Markham, and he's the editor of the series. And originally, he created this to kind of go back to the more traditional Holmes and Watson set in the Victorian era. So part one, all of the stories are set between 1881 and 1889. And originally, he envisaged one book of maybe 30 stories, because the previous record of the most amount of Sherlock Holmes stories that were new and traditional in a collection was 26. So he wanted to break that record and do 30. But what happened was quite phenomenal. There was so much interest from the writers around the world that the first launch was actually 3 volumes. The volumes were so quite large. I know you've got your copy there. I've got my copy.
Yeah.
So these
hardbacks, my copy right here.
These hardbacks are actually pretty big, and the first launch was actually 3 volumes, because there were 60 stories in that 3 volumes. And if we look at where we are today, just 4 years later, there are 12 volumes of the MX Book of New Sherlock Holmes Stories. And part of the allure of this collection is that all the authors donate all of their royalties to Stepping Stones School. So Stepping Stones is a school for kids with learning disabilities, and it's based at Undershaw, where Sir Arthur wrote The Hound of the Baskervilles, where he brought Sherlock Holmes back to life, and he wrote a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories there. And the building has been restored back to its former Victorian glory, and now the home of Stepping Stones School. There's 3 more volumes of the MX collection coming out in May. So it's already by far the world's biggest collection, with over 300 stories in it. And it will come up to close to 350 stories with the May editions. But you're in some really interesting company in these books. We've had Jonathan Kellerman, Lindsay Fay, even Lee Child of Jack Reacher fame has contributed to this collection. So it's a huge collection, and hopefully we'll see some more stories from you, Spencer, for future editions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was very glad to be a part of the part one. It's incredible how much it's grown. It's so interesting reading each volume and all the stories have become a part of it, and it's really a fun project to be a part of.
Fantastic. But I understand you're working on a new project. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I'm actually in the middle of writing a novel, my first full-length novel, that's set right after World War I, basically about a wealthy family in Britain and how they're dealing with the fallout after the war. The eldest son is a soldier that has just come back from the war and having a lot of issues with PTSD, which of course was not really that well known at the time. It's just something that their scientists and doctors are starting to figure out around World War I, because so many soldiers came back from the war really having some struggles. And the story is just about his family and how they're dealing with the sort of son that they expected to take over their household really not being mentally able to do that, and just how different the class differences had to be after World War I. It really changed the class structure in Britain, kind of top to bottom changed after so many sons that were, deceased after the war, and how the wealthy families had to sell a lot of their country estates because they could no longer keep them up. And basically just a lot of really hard changes for people in that time. And just basically the novel is just going to be about this one family and how they're dealing specifically with the fallout of the war. It's still only about half written. It's obviously includes a lot of research, as you would imagine. So it's slow going, but I hope to have it out within the next couple of years. So everyone can look for that, and information will be on my blog, certainly updating as I'm going along.
Fantastic, and we'll make sure that we include the link to your blog with video. The era that you set this in, of course, is right slap bang in the middle of the Holmes and Watson era as well. So you obviously like that early 20th century time frame.
Yeah, I do. I've always found that really fascinating. As an American, we really weren't taught a lot about World War I in school, and so that's something I've had to kind of educate myself about as an adult. And I just found the war really fascinating, and basically just how England dealt with it, specifically how it really was, on the home front for them. And just, I don't know, I just found all that really interesting compared to how America more, fought the war, but it really wasn't on their own home soil. And so we really don't have as much ties as an American to the war as England does. And so I find that really interesting to explore that from a British perspective and write, British characters and how they would feel about something like that.
Fantastic. And let's go on to the Art of Sherlock Holmes. So this is a really unique project conceived and curated by Phil Growick, who is a 2 times Sherlock Holmes novelist in his own right, with a couple of books out there. And Phil has brought together 15 artists from the West Palm Beach area to pair them up with 15 stories. So we had dozens and dozens of stories submitted for this first edition, and yours was picked, and it is story number 6 in the book. So how does it feel where you have an artist who's taken your story and spent weeks painting a piece of art from your story? How does that feel?
It's an incredible privilege to be included in the book and have an artist reading my story and then taking their own interpretation from it and creating art from that. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they make and seeing how they view the story and what they imagine, and really what stuck out to them as far as scenes they wanted to capture in their art. It'll be really cool to see.
Yeah, and we have a prototype of the book here. So it's a case-bound hardback. So it's very big, just to get it in terms of context so that you can see it compared to your hardback of the MX collection. As you can see, it's even bigger than the hardback from there. And of course, it's full color because of the painting and the art in there. Now, we've kept everything very secret. None of the art has been displayed in full. We've shown some glimpses of it, and we haven't told any of the authors which artists have painted their stories either. But I promise you, Spencer, you will find out relatively soon. So we're going to be sharing that with the team, and you'll be finding out who has done your art, and you'll get to see the beautiful painting that has been done of your story. So what we have coming up for the Art of Sherlock Holmes is some more editions as well. So if you do have another Sherlock Holmes short story bubbling away in your brain, Spencer, then please send it through to us, because we have the USA edition coming out in the fall. We're already a long way down the line to a potential second USA edition, and we have a global edition on the way as well, with artists already signed up from as far away as Mexico and Japan. Now, the first book comes out in May, on May 25th, and all of the art is going to come together in a gallery on the 9th of May, the Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens, which is a high-end gallery in West Palm Beach. So if you want to, I know it's the other side of the US for you, West Coast, and that's on the East Coast, but we'll be cutting live to the Art of Sherlock Holmes gallery exhibition on the 25th of May. So on the 25th of May, we've got an event at Undershore at Stepping Stone School, which of course you're invited to, and you're going to be participating in as well from Oregon via the web. So it's been fantastic to talk to you, Spencer.
Thank you for having me.
Novel, and please, as soon as you have a title for it and you have it ready for pre-order, then let us know, and we'll give it a good plug.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I will definitely let you know about that.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.